The Dvac district was never silent. Even in the artificial night cycle of Helio Station, the streets usually pulsed with noise traders hawking contraband from collapsible stalls, drunken miners laughing too loudly, the distant hum of skimmers rattling past overhead. Tonight, that familiar din had been swallowed by something rawer, more dangerous, the collective roar of an alien mob. Jeremy. Hansen wiped his hands down the front of his oil-stained work pants, smearing grease into darker streaks. He had been closing up his workshop when the first shouts rose, sharp enough to cut through the usual chaos of the district. Against his better judgment, he stepped into the corridor and followed the sound until it pulled him toward the plaza dot. At first, he thought it was a brawl. The Vac was full of them, and humans like him had learned to keep out of Valkyrie disputes. But as he edged closer, keeping to the shadows cast by towering stacks of scrap and neon-burnt signage, he saw the crowd forming a tight circle. Dozens of Valkyrie, their blue skin glinting under the harsh floodlamps, their silver hair catching the light like strands of wire. Their faces bore the intricate markings of their species, but twisted now with outrage. Jeremy's heart sank. In the center of that ring knelt a woman. Her silvery hair hung loose around her shoulders, tangled and damp with sweat. She was Valkyrie, tall and slender, though her blue skin looked pale under the lights. Fear flickered in her violet eyes, yet her back remained straight, her chin tilted defiantly upward. "I spoke only truth," she cried. The words carried through Jeremy's translator implant, clear as if she had spoken English herself. The response was immediate, a howl of fury, voices overlapping in condemnation. One figure emerged from the press of bodies, a male draped in ornate robes, the kind Jeremy recognized from seeing High Council envoys pass through the docks. His voice boomed over the crowd, amplified by authority and arrogance alike. "The Council has judged you, Nari, for your falsehoods, for the danger you have brought upon our trade agreements. You are sentenced to silence." Jeremy's gut clenched. He didn't know this woman, didn't know what she had said or why it mattered, but the ritualistic weight in the robed Valkyrie's voice chilled him. 2 guards seized her arms. She resisted only for a moment, twisting with surprising strength before their grip pinned her in place. The official produced a blade, curved and gleaming wickedly under the lights. The mob hushed, as though the entire district held its breath. Jeremy whispered a curse. He wanted to look away, but couldn't. The woman didn't beg. She didn't scream, not even when they forced her mouth open. She met the crowd's fury with unflinching eyes until the blade descended. Jeremy's stomach lurched as a flash of metal severed her tongue. The sound that followed wasn't hers. It was the crowd, roaring approval as the official raised the bloodied scrap aloft like a trophy. "Let this be a warning," he declared, voice thundering. "The word of the council is final. Those who question it will never speak again." One by one, the Valkyrie began to disperse, their fury spent, their judgment delivered. Not a single one looked back at the body crumpled on the plaza floor, blood soaking through the gag tied cruelly across her mouth. Jeremy pressed himself tighter into the shadows, heart hammering. He had survived on Helio Station by keeping his head down, fixing engines and recyclers, never stepping into the affairs of aliens who already regarded humans as tolerated nuisances. This wasn't his fight. It couldn't be. But when the last of the Valkyrie footsteps faded down the corridor, he moved before he could talk himself out of it. His boots were heavy on the decking, though he tried to keep quiet. The woman stirred faintly as he knelt beside her, her gaze fluttering open to meet his. For the first time she seemed afraid of him, the human face leaning over her. "Easy," Jeremy murmured, raising both hands to show he meant no harm. "I'm not with them." "I'm going to help you." She tried to crawl away, but weakness made the effort pitiful. Jeremy's chest tightened. If station security found her, they'd finish the job. He didn't allow himself another moment of doubt. "I'm sorry about this," he muttered, sliding his arms beneath her. She was lighter than he expected, trembling against his chest. The heat of her blood soaked into his shirt. He rose and carried her toward the maze of corridors, toward the dull glow of his workshop's entrance. The door hissed shut behind them, muting the world outside. Jeremy's cluttered domain smelled of metal and ozone, shelves lined with tools and parts. He laid her gently on the cot in the corner, then grabbed his medkit with hands that shook harder than he liked. Her violet eyes followed him, wide and wary. For years he had been just another face in the crowd, an outsider who kept his head down. But tonight, as he cleaned the blood from her mouth and bound the terrible wound, Jeremy realized something had shifted inside him. He had stepped across a line he could never uncross. He had chosen compassion over safety, and nothing on Helio Station would ever be the same. Jeremy's workshop smelled of solder and oil, a space carved out of chaos where order had always reigned. Now that order felt fragile. On the cot, the Valkyrie woman lay unmoving, her chest rising in shallow, uneven breaths. Jeremy pressed a cloth to her mouth, trying to slow the bleeding, though every tremor of her body reminded him of the brutality he had just witnessed. "Come on," he muttered under his breath, as if words alone might tether her to life. He reached for the antiseptic spray, hands working with the precision of a man used to patching up machines, not people. The wound was ugly, jagged, raw, and already beginning to fester from the filthy gag they'd tied over it. She flinched when the antiseptic hissed, eyes flashing open. They were a startling violet, sharp even through the haze of pain. Jeremy froze, caught in that gaze. He saw no surrender there, no plea for mercy, only confusion, fear, and the stubborn flicker of defiance that had carried her through the plaza. "Easy," he said softly, though he knew she couldn't answer. "You're safe here." For now. Her hands twitched against the cot. She wanted something, but couldn't speak. Jeremy grabbed his datapad and slid it toward her. For a moment she only stared, as if weighing whether to trust him. Then, with trembling fingers, she tapped out a single word: "NARI." Jeremy read it aloud. "Nari, that's your name." He hesitated before adding, "Jeremy Hansen." "I fix things," she typed again, slower this time. "Why? Why help?" Jeremy rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly aware of the grease smudges still streaked across his skin. "Because leaving you there felt wrong. Because no one deserves what they did." He exhaled, shaking his head. "Guess that's reason enough." Her eyes softened, but only slightly. Another string of words appeared on the pad. Shipments. Not lies. Medical supplies. Contaminated. Jeremy frowned. Contaminated? As in what? Spoiled? She shook her head fiercely, typing with renewed urgency. Deliberate. Parasites. Microscopic. Neurological damage. Colonies in danger. The word struck him like a blow. Human colonies. His people. You're saying the Valkyrie Council knew about this? Her jaw tightened. She nodded once. Jeremy swore under his breath. He had always known politics on Helio Station were dirty, but deliberate sabotage? That was beyond corruption. It was murder. Thousands of humans depended on those shipments. If what she claimed was true, her so-called lies had been an attempt to save lives. And they had silenced her for it. Nari tapped the pad again, slower now, exhaustion weighing on her. "I found proof. They destroyed it." "Cut me silent." Jeremy sat back, heart pounding. This wasn't just a wounded alien in his workshop anymore. This was the key to something far bigger than he had ever wanted to be part of. He was just a mechanic. He fixed broken recyclers, patched up hover skimmers, argued with customers over repair fees. He wasn't supposed to be the one holding the fate of human colonies in his hands. He glanced at the locked drawer under his workbench. Inside, hidden from prying eyes, lay the prototype he'd salvaged months ago, a Neuralink designed to bypass damaged pathways and restore communication. Dangerous tech. Illegal tech. But maybe, just maybe, the only way to give her a voice again. Jeremy forced the thought aside. Too risky. Too soon. For now, she needed rest. He pulled a blanket over her, dimmed the lights, and sat heavily in the chair near the door, his gaze fixed on the silent figure across the room. You tried to save them, he whispered into the dark. And they cut out your tongue for it. Nari's eyelids fluttered, but she did not wake. Jeremy leaned back, sleepless and unsettled, realizing he had crossed a line that night in the plaza. He had chosen to act, and in doing so, he had entangled himself in a truth powerful enough to topple worlds. The question that gnawed at him as station night cycle dragged on was not whether he could protect her. It was whether he had the courage to let her speak again. Jeremy sat slouched in his chair, boots planted on the workshop floor, eyes gritty from a sleepless night. Every few minutes he glanced at the cot where Nari lay. She hadn't stirred in hours, but her breathing had steadied, and the angry pallor of her skin had softened. For the moment, at least, she was safe. But Jeremy wasn't. His stomach twisted as he thought about what he'd done scooping up a Valkyrie from a plaza execution and smuggling her into his shop. If the council guards discovered her here, he'd be lucky to get deported. More likely, they'd make an example of him alongside her. He rubbed at his temples, trying to think, but his gaze kept drifting to the locked drawer beneath his workbench. He had told himself 100 times never to touch what was inside. Too dangerous. Too much trouble. But as violet eyes flickered open across the room, watching him in silence, Jeremy knew he was running out of choices. When she tried to sit up, he was at her side in 2 strides, helping her ease against the cot's thin pillow. Her hands trembled as she reached for the datapad. They will come, she typed, the letters shaky but clear. Not safe here. Jeremy crouched beside her, lowering his voice, though no one could hear them. I know. That's why I need to give you something. A chance to fight back. She frowned, suspicion flashing across her features. He stood, crossing to the workbench, and keyed in the security code. The drawer hissed open. Inside lay a small case, black and padded with foam, holding a device no bigger than a coin. Its faint blue glow cast an otherworldly sheen over the cluttered workshop. Jeremy lifted it carefully. This is a Neuralink prototype, military grade. Stole it off a misrouted shipment last year. Wasn't planning on using it, hell. I wasn't planning on keeping it. But it might be the only way to give you a voice again. Nari's eyes widened. She pointed to herself, then to the device, disbelief etched across her face. Jeremy nodded. It bypasses damaged neural pathways, lets your brain signals translate directly into a voice synthesizer. Dangerous. Experimental. Worth more than everything else I own. But it could work. She hesitated, glancing toward the datapad still balanced on her lap. Slowly, her fingers spelled out, why risk this for me? A human. You owe nothing. Jeremy exhaled. Maybe I don't, but I can't stand by while they cut out tongues for telling the truth. And if what you say about those shipments is real, people I know my own are in danger. That makes it my fight, too. Nari's expression shifted. The suspicion ebbed, replaced by something softer, almost curious. She reached out, her cool blue fingers brushing the device. Then, with a firm nod, she set the datapad aside. Jeremy swallowed, feeling the weight of the moment. All right. Hold still. He knelt beside her, brushing her silver hair back to reveal the smooth line of her temple. His fingers trembled slightly as he positioned the Neuralink against the bone just behind her ear. The device pulsed once, then adhered with a faint click. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the small speaker unit attached to her collar crackled. A voice, flat, metallic, but unmistakably hers, emerged. Test. Test. Is this working? Nari's violet eyes went wide with shock. Her hands flew to her throat, then to the speaker, then to Jeremy. A soundless laugh escaped her lips, even as tears welled in her eyes. Jeremy grinned despite himself. Yeah, it's working. She touched his hand, her expression fierce now. Thank you, Jeremy, the synthesizer said in its hollow tone, for giving me back what they stole. Jeremy felt something stir in his chest, a dangerous warmth he hadn't let himself feel in years. He swallowed it down, forcing himself to focus. Don't thank me yet. This changes everything. If they track this signal, if they find us. He let the words hang. Nari leaned closer, her voice metallic but steady. Then we run, together. Her words hung between them, heavier than steel. Jeremy realized he had crossed another line tonight. He hadn't just saved her life, he had given her a voice again. And with it, the two of them had just declared war on the lies that held Helios Station together. The diplomatic quarter of Helios Station felt like another world compared to the chaos of Dvak. The streets here were cleaner, the neon subdued, the air scrubbers working overtime to keep the tang of industry at bay. Jeremy led the way with his shoulders hunched, head low, a battered toolkit slung over one arm to sell the illusion of a mechanic on a service call. Beside him, Nari moved under the hood of a modified station jumpsuit, her long frame hidden in folds of fabric, silver hair tucked carefully away. Every step seemed to cost her strength, yet she kept close, silent except for the faint hum of the Neuralink beneath her collar. Commander Jack Holt opened the door to his secure apartment before Jeremy could even knock. The tall human's uniform looked slept in, but his eyes were sharp, scanning the corridor before ushering them inside. The door sealed with a hiss, the security locks engaging in sequence. Jeremy exhaled the breath he'd been holding. You weren't kidding, Holt said, his gaze flicking from Jeremy to the hooded figure at his side. That's her? Nari pushed back the hood, violet eyes meeting his squarely. Her mechanical voice broke the silence. I am Nari. You are Holt. The commander's brow furrowed, but he gave a slow nod. You've been through hell. But if what Hansen says is true, you might be the key to blowing this whole conspiracy wide open. Jeremy guided Nari to the couch as Holt activated a secure comm terminal. Within moments, a flickering holofeed filled the Air 5 human officials seated behind a long table, their faces grim. This emergency tribunal is convened, said the central figure. Admiral Kwan, we are prepared to hear testimony regarding alleged contamination of medical shipments bound for human colonies. His eyes narrowed as they took in Nari's bandaged face and the faint glow at her temple. Identify yourself. Nari straightened, her voice firm despite the mechanical undertone. I am Nari, former quality control specialist for Valkyrie Medical Exports. I testify that High Counselor Dravik ordered deliberate contamination of medical supplies parasites engineered to cause neurological decay. Thousands of human lives are at risk. She spoke steadily, Jeremy watching as her hands moved in small gestures, emphasizing her words. Holt stood off to one side, jaw clenched, while the tribunal scribbled notes. But Jeremy couldn't shake the tension crawling along his skin. Something felt wrong. The diplomatic quarter was usually busy even during station night cycle, but when he glanced through the polarized window, the plazas below were nearly empty. Too empty. Holt, he murmured, tugging the commander closer. Look at this. Doesn't it seem off? The commander frowned, following his gaze. Too quiet, he agreed. Howell, sweep the perimeter. Lieutenant Howell Small, sharp-eyed, already unpacking a portable terminal at the dining table tapped in a sequence. Her brow creased. Sensors show green, but I'm picking up an energy signature on the east wall. Faint, almost like... Jeremy's stomach dropped. A tracker. They're scanning for the Neuralink's output. Nari faltered mid-sentence as the realization hit them all. Holt swore under his breath. Damn it. If they've developed a way to trace that tech, it's only a matter of time before... The apartment lights flickered. A dull thud reverberated through the walls. The security grid shimmered red. They're here, Howell said, voice flat with urgency. Multiple Valkyrie operatives breaching the quarter. They bypassed diplomatic locks. Jeremy's pulse spiked. He grabbed Nari's hand, pulling her from the couch. We're out of time. The tribunal won't act fast enough. He turned to Howell, heat in his voice. Can you hijack the station's broadcast system? Howell blinked at him, startled, then glanced at Holt. The commander gave a tight nod. Do it. If we're going down, the whole station hears the truth. 2 minutes, Howell muttered, already typing furiously. Jeremy turned to Nari. Her violet eyes locked on his, wide with fear, but blazing with something fiercer beneath. Are you ready for this? He asked quietly. She reached up, her cool fingers brushing his jaw with surprising tenderness. Her synthetic voice whispered, They cut my tongue to silence me. But tonight they will hear everything. Jeremy squeezed her hand, feeling the weight of her resolve settle into his own bones. Outside, the thud of boots and the groan of metal doors being forced echoed closer. Inside, a countdown ticked away on Howell's screen. 1 minute until every screen, every speaker, every corridor of Helio Station belonged to them. 1 minute until Nari's truth set fire to the lies of the Valkyrie Council. And in that minute, Jeremy knew he had crossed yet another line. There would be no going back. When the first crash rattled the apartment's reinforced entrance, Howell's terminal flashed green. You're live, she said. Nari stepped into the center of the room, lifted her chin, and let her voice hollow, metallic, but unflinching carry across the entire station. People of Helio, my name is Nari. I was silenced for speaking truth. But tonight, I will be heard. The roar of the mob in Vac Plaza seemed to echo back through memory. But Jeremy sensed this was different. This roar, when it came, would belong not to executioners, but to the awakening of two worlds. The broadcast rippled across Helio Station like a shockwave. Every screen flickered to life-rusted wall displays in the underdocks, shimmering holopanels and luxury decks, grimy cumpads clutched by workers on break. Humans and Valkyrie alike froze where they stood as the image of a blue-skinned woman with violet eyes filled their view. I was silenced for speaking the truth, Nari declared, her mechanical voice cutting through the static of transmission. But you will hear it now. The shipments your council promised to protect contaminated. Parasites engineered to rot the mind. High Counselor Dravik profited while your children, human and Valkyrie, sickened and died. The words rang like a hammer on steel. Jeremy watched from the shadows of Holt's apartment, his hand hovering protectively at Nari's back. He could feel the tremor in her body, not fear, but the weight of finally being heard. The reinforced door shuddered with another impact. Sparks showered from its frame. Holt crouched beside it, weapon drawn, eyes narrowed. They've brought breaching gear. Won't hold more than a minute. Howell hunched over her terminal, hands flying. I'm piggybacking the broadcast onto auxiliary maintenance relays. Even if they cut power, the feed will loop for another 20 minutes. Long enough to turn this station upside down. Jeremy nodded, already dragging a heavy workbench toward the door. He wedged it sideways, adding to the barricade, his mechanic's hands moving with frantic precision. We make them fight for every inch. A crash echoed through the building as a side wall blew inward. Smoke billowed into the room. Dark figures surged forward, Valkyrie operatives in matte black combat gear, eyes cold, rifles raised. Holt fired first, the crack of his sidearm deafening in the enclosed space. One operative dropped. The others returned fire, rounds sparking off the barricade. Howell yelped, ducking lower, but didn't stop typing. Jeremy's pulse thundered. He scanned the room for anything he could use. His gaze snagged on a maintenance panel. He ripped it open, yanking free a bundle of fiber optic cables. The emergency systems shrieked, awake alarms blaring, sprinklers releasing a cold rain. Confusion rippled through the attackers as water hissed against hot rifle barrels. Jeremy grabbed a loose length of conduit, swung it with all his weight, and sent one operative crashing into a wall. Primitive works. He snarled through clenched teeth. Came a sound that cut through the chaos, a strangled cry from behind him. Jeremy spun. Nari had doubled over, clutching her abdomen, her violet eyes wide with pain. Dr. Sims, the gray-haired medic Holt had smuggled in earlier, rushed to her side, scanner in hand. She's gone into labor, Sims barked. The stress, the wound, her body couldn't wait. Jeremy's world tilted. Now? Here? Now, Sims snapped. Unless you want to lose them both. Bullets screamed past. Holt gritted his teeth, dragging an overturned table into place for cover. Jeremy, focus. I'll hold the line. You take care of her. Jeremy dropped to his knees beside Nari. Her synthetic voice crackled, ragged. Our child, protect. Him. You protect him, Jeremy said fiercely, gripping her trembling hand. I'll protect you. Sin scanned again and swore. The Neuralink, it's interfering. The energy field is stressing the fetus. Nari's eyes shot to Jeremy's, frantic. Her voice box hissed. If they remove it. Silence again. Jeremy's heart cracked. He cupped her face, water dripping down both their cheeks from the sprinklers. We'll find another way for you to speak. But right now, our baby comes first. She blinked, tears mixing with the spray, then nodded once. Sims and the Valkyrie medic Terran moved fast, deactivating the device. The faint glow at her temple faded. The room fell to the sound of alarms, gunfire, and Nari's ragged breathing. Jeremy bent close, whispering in her ear. You are not alone. I'm here. I'm not letting you go. The barricade groaned as another impact rattled the frame. Holt fired again, blood streaking his temple, shouting over the chaos. They're breaking through. Howell slammed a palm on her console. Broadcast is maxed. The whole station knows. Dravik's name is Ash. A final lock snapped. The door screeched open. Silhouettes filled the breach. And at that moment between gunfire, alarms, and the sound of a woman in labor, Jeremy Hansen understood he had stepped into something larger than rebellion. This was no longer about survival. It was about truth, and the impossible life now fighting to be born in the middle of a war zone. The door finally gave way with a tortured screech, metal bending under the final charge. Smoke and sparks burst inward as Valkyrie extremists stormed through the breach, weapons raised and faces set with murderous resolve. And at their front, wrapped in torn robes that once marked his status, strode High Counselor Dravik himself. His silver hair was matted, his eyes wild with the fury of a man who had ruled by fear for too long and was now cornered. The whistleblower and her human pet, he sneered, his gaze sweeping the room until it landed on Nari, pale and trembling on the couch, her bandages soaked through, her body racked with the beginnings of labor. Still alive. Not for long. Jeremy stepped between them, wrench in one hand like a blade, conduit pipe in the other. His chest heaved, his boots planted firmly against the slit decking. It's over, Dravik. Everyone on this station heard your name. They know the truth. Dravik's laugh was harsh, broken. Truth? Do you think your pathetic broadcast will matter? The Valkyrie are destined to rule. Humans were always meant to serve. His gaze flicked to Holt, crouched with his sidearm, blood streaking his jaw. You infest this station like vermin. I did what was necessary. Howell's fingers moved with deliberate calm over her terminal. The faint green light pulsed across her screen, confirmation that every word was being relayed, echoed through Helio's communication grid. Dravik didn't realize it, but his every boast was spilling across the ears of humans and Valkyrie alike. Necessary? Holt growled, teeth bared. You poisoned shipments bound for children's hospitals, for outposts barely hanging on. That's genocide. Dravik's face twisted with pride. The parasites were elegant, slow-acting, impossible to trace. By the time your primitive doctors discovered the pattern, it would have been too late. Your colony's expansion would have slowed. Our trade dominance secured. A simple solution, Nari gasped, clutching her abdomen, her silent cry one of rage as much as pain. Dr. Sims and Turan bent over her, frantic as the contractions came faster, stronger. The room stank of smoke, ozone, and desperation. Dravik's lip curled as he saw her convulse. And now this mockery of nature, he spat. A human Valkyrie hybrid. Proof of corruption. Proof that our kind must remain pure. If I cannot stop your blasphemous lies, I will at least end this abomination. He drew a concealed weapon from his robes, raising it toward Nari. Jeremy's world shrank to a single heartbeat. He lunged, tackling the counselor just as the weapon discharged, the bolt searing past to scorch the ceiling. The two men crashed to the floor, grappling. Dravik was stronger than Jeremy expected, desperation lending him brutal force. He struck Jeremy across the jaw, stars bursting behind his eyes, then wrenched the weapon back into his grasp. Jeremy twisted, slamming his weight against the Valkyrie's wrist. The gun clattered across the floor, skittering toward Holt. Holt dove for it, but an extremist's boot caught him in the ribs, knocking him sideways. Dravik reared back, hands curling into claws, his voice a roar. I will not let this future take root. And then before Jeremy could rise, Nari herself moved. Despite the agony tearing through her, she surged from the couch, a blue blur of fury and defiance. She collided with Dravik, her hands locking onto him with surprising strength. Her violet eyes blazed, silent but filled with a fire that stopped him cold. She forced him to the ground with a strength born not of muscle, but of will. Around them, Holt fired again, dropping one extremist. The others faltered, shaken by their leader's downfall. Howell shouted over the din, "It's live!" Everyone just heard him admit it. His pride has undone him. Dravik's snarl faltered as the consystem crackled, a voice cutting in, measured, authoritative, undeniable. High Elder Marina, High Counselor Dravik, she announced, her face appearing on emergency hollas across the room and the station beyond. Your crimes have been confessed in your own words. You are stripped of authority. You will face judgment for acts against both Valkyrie and human populations. The extremists glanced at each other, their certainty wavering. One by one, their weapons lowered. Dravik's eyes darted wildly, realization dawning too late. Cowards. He spat. You will all, but his tirade ended in a grunt as Jeremy slammed him back to the deck, pinning him with grim determination. Behind them, Nari let out a shuddering cry, her body arching as another contraction tore through her. Dr. Sim's voice cut across the chaos, urgent but steady. It's happening now. She's in labor. Jeremy, we need you here. Jeremy froze, torn between the man he held pinned and the woman who was everything to him. Then Holt was there, hauling Dravik up with iron restraint, cuffs snapping over his wrists. "Go," Holt barked. "Your fight's with her now. I'll handle this bastard." Jeremy stumbled back to Nari's side, clutching her hand as she fought through the waves of pain. Her grip was iron, her eyes wild, but when they met his, the fury softened into something fierce and tender all at once. "You're not alone," he whispered, his forehead pressing to hers, as alarms still wailed, as enemies still lingered in the shadows. Not anymore. And as the station reeled from Dravik's downfall, as the truth seared across two peoples, a child was about to be born in the middle of fire and blood, a child who would change everything. Chaos of battle melted into something raw and urgent. Smoke still curled from the shattered doorway, and Holt's men shoved Davek to his knees in restraints, but all of it faded for Jeremy as he knelt at Nari's side. She gripped his hand with desperate strength, her violet eyes locked on his, her body trembling with the force of each contraction. Dr. Sims and Specialist Tehran worked quickly, spreading sterile cloths across the couch, calibrating scanners, their voices taut but focused. "We don't have time for a transfer," Sims said, brushing damp silver hair from Nari's forehead. "We deliver here. Jeremy, stay with her." He swallowed hard, squeezing Nari's hand. "Always." The next hour blurred into a storm of heat, pain, and whispered encouragements. Jeremy murmured nonsense at first, words meant to soothe, to anchor her in the moment. But as the minutes dragged on, he found himself speaking truths he hadn't admitted even to himself. "You saved them all, Nari. They'll know your name. Our son will know your courage." Nari couldn't answer in words, the knurling gone, her voice stolen once again, but her gaze spoke volumes. Every time she crushed his hand, every time her eyes found his, Jeremy understood. She wasn't afraid. Not anymore. With a final cry and one last push, the silence shattered. A new sound filled the apartment, a thin, defiant wail, piercing and miraculous. Dr. Sims lifted a tiny, squirming form into the air, his pale blue skin glistening, a crown of silver-brown hair catching the emergency lights. "A boy," Tehran announced, awe breaking through his clinical tone. "Healthy, strong." Jeremy's chest collapsed in a sob he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Nari's tears streamed silently down her cheeks as Sims placed the child into her arms. She cradled him close, her body shaking with exhaustion, her expression fierce with a joy so pure it silenced the room more effectively than any gunfire. Jeremy bent low, brushing trembling fingers across the boy's cheek. The infant's eyes opened for the first time violet like Nari's, yet with a flicker of human determination. Jeremy felt something shift inside him, something vast and unnameable. "He's perfect," he whispered. "NAR." I fumbled for the datapad. Her hands shook as she typed one word, holding it up for him to see. "Tar." Jeremy repeated it aloud, tasting the syllable. "Tar." He smiled through his tears. "It's perfect." The moment was shattered by a new presence. The holoscreens blinked to life again, and High Elder Marina's face filled the room, her expression solemn, but touched with wonder. She had been watching. "Extraordinary," she murmured. "A bridge between our peoples. Proof that truth cannot be silenced." She addressed them directly, her voice firm. "Nari of the Valkyrie, Jeremy Hansen of Earth. On behalf of the High Council, I extend protection to you and to your child. What was once unthinkable is now undeniable. May this boy grow as a symbol of unity, not division." Dravik raged against his bindings, spitting venom, but his words were drowned out by the rising chorus of voices beyond the apartment. Through the open comms, messages poured in, humans and Valkyrie alike, demanding justice, offering support, marveling at the impossible birth. 3 months later, Heliostation had changed. A joint inspection corps now oversaw every supply line. Dravik stood trial on his homeworld, his arrogance finally stripped bare. And in the heart of the diplomatic quarter, a new building had opened, The human Valkyrie Cultural Exchange. Jeremy stood at the back of its gleaming hall, rocking Tar in his arms. The boy had grown quickly, already strong enough to curl his tiny fingers around Jeremy's shirt and tug with surprising force. His eyes, bright violet, watched the crowd with uncanny focus, as if he understood more than any infant should. At the podium, Nari spoke. A new device, sleek, seamlessly fused with Valkyrie biotech, had been fitted to her temple, allowing her voice to resonate with warmth and nuance. The sound was her own again, tempered by something unearthly, beautiful. "We cannot change the past," she said, her voice carrying through the hall. "But we can build a future where truth is stronger than fear, where compassion is more powerful than corruption, where a childlike mind like ours need never hide." Jeremy felt Tar shift in his arms. The boy's gaze swept the room, and for a heartbeat, Jeremy swore he felt something stir in the back of his mind. A whisper, a connection, subtle but undeniable. He looked down at his son in awe. The impossible had not only been born. It carried with it something neither species had known before. Nari's eyes found his across the crowd, violet burning with pride. She lifted her hand, palm open, and he raised his in answer, their son between them. Her tongue had been severed for lies, but together they had spoken the truth. A truth made flesh, one that no blade could ever cut away. And as the applause swelled like thunder, Jeremy realized the revolution had only just begun.